Let's just celebrate right quick. How about that? You want to have a little celebration, KG?
Well, here's the thing, right? When we thought about what this shakeup of the coaching staff was going to look like, I think for a lot of us, including me, thought, well, the foregone conclusion is that Dan Quinn is not going to be a part of this coaching staff. And you saw some of the defensive assistants that also weren't retained, although they were on expiring contracts. We're talking about the Leon Letts of the world, the George Edwardses of the world. Maybe indications that, they're going to be moving on because the defensive coordinator is going to be moving on. And then Tom Pelissero, who's the Cowboys whisperer. When it comes to all things Cowboys news, apparently, says, Dan Quinn's not going anywhere. And Dan Quinn feeling like there's something, quote unquote, special brewing here. And you look at his defenses. I mean, the last 2 years led the league, in takeaways, which is pretty, amazing accomplishment in itself. But for me, I just keep thinking, what continues to keep him here? And
it's a fantastic question.
Is there an opportunity? And I will say this about Mike McCarthy, because in a lot of ways, Mike McCarthy, in the way that he has been talked about around here, has been kind of dirty. Because, he won and went through all the things that he went through in 2020. Won 6 games. Dak Prescott got hurt. Okay. 2021, you win 12 games. You get the team to the wild card round. You lose in disappointing fashion. 2022, this season, you win 12 games again. Get the team not only into the wild card round, but you move past the wild card round to the divisional round, and you want a playoff game. So it seems like, based on what you would want your head coach to do coming into a new situation back in 2020, is steadily build your program. And I guess from the most technical sense, each year this team has taken another step forward. The question is, going into 2023, going into the 4th year of his 5-year contract, does he take now the next step, winning in the divisional round to get to a conference title game? So Dan Quinn's going to help you out a lot with that, but it also means there's a little bit more pressure for Mike McCarthy, because all the changes that we've seen and that still could be coming signal to me that the Joneses had a message for Mike McCarthy and says, hey, some things need to shake up around here. We're going to find a way to try and keep Dan Quinn. And guess what? Dan Quinn is still back. But you, as the head coach here, now you've got to make some changes to try to make this thing shake going into 2023 now.
So obviously the pertinent question, or the biggest question, I think, for a lot of folks just is the shock, or the one of shock, which is what is causing him to remain? Like, what is the decision-making process here? And obviously on the truckwreck.com text line, we got folks, chiming in. We appreciate you doing that. From that 972, they say, listen, not everyone wants to be a head guy. It's less stress being a DC rather than a head coach. And I don't think that's the case here, because I don't think if that's how you feel, you do not go on the parade of job searches, not once, but twice, right? Like, you say he was trying it out to see if maybe that was how he feels. One, he's already been a head coach, right? He's been a head coach once. Two, he was in this job seeking process last year. And if those two things, if he was in that place that you're hypothesizing there, 972, I feel like he would have made that decision that, I don't need to be going after these. Because there are guys who decline the requests for interviews, despite the fact that, hey, I imagine their agents are like, hey, bro, go get that more money. Because quiet as it's kept, head coaching salaries rocketing up. But it does feel like that's what he wants to do. He does want to be a head coach again. And with that being the case, there's a couple of different places you can go from there. One is something that we talked about with Brian Broaddus in the Crosstalk with the G-Bag Nation about an hour ago, which was maybe those jobs weren't actually there for him, right? He's obviously been, we can look at betting odds and places where, he's high up there, maybe 1 or 2 on the highest betting odds on whether or not, he'll become the head coach of this place or that place. But maybe, with the benefit of being inside of these things and having those conversations, he looked up and saw those jobs were not going to come free like he wanted to. And maybe that's why he stays where he is. Also, there's the thought, for me at least, that maybe he looks around, and as you get, more information through the interview process, because you're not only just having them make their decision on you, you're making your decision on them, those positions. And I do wonder if he looks around and he goes, hey, man, these aren't positions that I particularly want, right? Like, there are obviously a lot of these jobs come open for various reasons, lack of production, what have you. And maybe those don't end up being fits. That possibility I've been kind of toying with, but the tough thing about it is, And maybe because he's already been a head coach, you're always in that head coach situation.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Byron Leftwich, man. It can go left real quick when you're like, hey, you are a hot name, you are a possibility, you are sought after. If you don't strike while the iron's hot, this thing can turn on you because there might be another big name or another, hot name of the day that then takes your place in this coaching carousel cycle. And just maybe you get to a place where the next year isn't guaranteed that you're going to be that hot name still. So I don't know. These are the things that I've been thinking about when it came to Dan Quinn.
I mean, and, to your point, all money ain't good money. And when you look around at the jobs that were available, yes, Arizona presented certain things that you would possibly be attracted to, but your quarterback situation is in a little bit of trouble right now because Kyler Murray dealing with the torn ACL. Indianapolis, that needs a entire cultural reshaping and structure right there. And Jim Irsay sounds like he's fixated on hiring Jeff Saturday as it is. Denver has got all the money in the world behind Walmart, and they could be able to be in a position with a good defense to make something shake there. But I think for Dan Quinn, looking at the situation that he has, he's got a generational talent in Micah Parsons. He has obviously built a rapport and a culture with this defense that these players love playing for him and that he loves coaching them. And the situation that he's been able to create here is something that he can continue to build on. Also, the elephant in the room being with the opportunity that might present itself if this team struggles. Now, it's kind of a catch-22. We had Babe Laufenberg in the studio last night talking about the idea that if you've got a coach that you possibly want to replace Mike McCarthy and that person's on staff and you struggle, maybe there's a little bit of hesitation to elevate a particular offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator into that head coaching spot, depending on who struggles. But if this defense continues to play well, and let's say Kellen Moore is retained, which we'll get into later on in the show, and Mike McCarthy isn't necessarily brought back after the 2023 season, well, you've got a guy who a lot of people in that building, as we've heard reportedly, love, and that's Dan Quinn. So maybe the best idea for him is to continue to stand pat in what he has, build that there, and then maybe find himself with a golden opportunity to be able to take over the job here. Again, it's just, I hate the fact that we have gone some of the ways down the road with Mike McCarthy that we've had, but I think part of that is you hired this coach because of what his resume says he can do in January and beyond. And if that doesn't happen for this group, then maybe that kind of major change will be taking place no matter how well, quote unquote, Mike McCarthy did here in Dallas.
Yeah, and that's the tough thing about this. Somebody on the text line was getting after us about the idea that, maybe Mike McCarthy was kind of forced to make these changes. It's possible that he did the evaluation and this is all internal reflection, right? That's fair. I do think that's a point to make because it feels weird that we're getting out ahead of this and before we even go into the season. I mean, before we went into last season and the season before, Mike McCarthy was on, firing watch. All he's had is opportunities where this team has been good, right? If you want to have the debate about grade and, successful in the playoffs, right, that's all there to be had. But, this team has been good. But you did rightfully say, this is the expectation that they set and the way that they talked about it once he was hired is that this is a guy who has a Super Bowl winning coach that can get you to that place. I don't know. At this point, I don't even want to, I get it. We talked about it and we kind of have to talk about those possibilities as to what the decision making is. But the fact of the matter is you get to retain this guy who is proven to be more than capable to run a defense, particularly this defense with the talent that you have, which is great for this team, right? We were having concerns about how you replace him. Is your defense going to fall back? And I think that now you can have some peace of mind that your defense probably, because every year is different. You can never know for sure, but your defense is probably going to remain some level of strength for your team. And that's a good thing to try and get yourself in a place where you compete in the way that you want to, because I know that was some of the things that made people sad after that loss to San Francisco. Was you look like you belonged on that field, and a lot of people were looking forward thinking your defensive coordinator won't be back, and that will maybe cause some level of drop off. The nice thing about it is you can maybe anticipate that drop off won't be there, and you can go again. Go at trying to get that deep run into the playoffs and possibly win that Super Bowl that people have been clamoring for decades upon decades.
The other part about this too, real quick, is the idea that the Cowboys are trying to streamline this thing when it comes to, you talked about some of this last night, kind of trimming the fat around the edges from an organizational standpoint.
Didn't Jerry get out here and talk about all the coaches that he's paying?
It's just, and one way you can eliminate that is to eliminate jobs and find a way to streamline some of this and centralize who is doing the work that's most important to help this team move in the right direction and be able to identify who is and who isn't doing that in the most consistent of ways. So, look, Mike McCarthy going into his 4th year as head coach, it seems like has all the confidence in the world from Jerry and this organization to continue to do his job. Because one thing that I want to know going forward for him relative to Kellen Moore, Dan Quinn, and his entire staff, how much is he empowered by Jerry and Stephen Jones to do his job on a daily basis? And does the things that we've seen take place over the last 24, 48 hours when it comes to some of the coaches being removed undermine some of that? Or does it strengthen Mike McCarthy's position in his ability to do his job here? Because the two guys that he lost that were closest to him, Joe Philbin and Rob Davis, in my personal opinion, I don't think those are moves that Mike McCarthy personally wanted to make himself. Well, that's just my thought on that.
The tough thing about that is I understand where that question comes from. I think that's a question we're just not going to have the answer to.
It's true.
How many years in are we now that we don't really have a great answer as to what exactly he does and everything? And it's not necessarily that we need to or that we're going to need to know that, but the fact of the matter is that we don't have a full-fledged idea of what that is, and it might just be that we're not going to get that information out of him and this organization.